Ever lay awake at night just like really thinking about stuff? I mean, like the big questions,
Yeah.
What's it all about? What's the point of all this? What's the meaning of life? All that.
Yeah, for sure. It's like you can't escape it sometimes.
Exactly. Well, we're tackling that head on today. We're going deep on the ideas of Albert Camus.
Oh, cool.
And he had this pretty radical take on the whole meaning of life thing. He thought maybe we're looking in the wrong place.
Interesting. So not that those big questions aren't important.
Right. He wasn't saying to ignore them, but like maybe the universe isn't going to just hand us the answers,
Yeah, I get that. Like we want this neat little package explaining everything, but
it doesn't quite work that way. So Camus, this French Algerian philosopher, super influential guy, he really digs into all this. He even won a Nobel Prize.
wow.
Yeah. He saw a lot of hardship in his life, but he didn't just throw his hands up and say, well, that's it then. He actually found a way to embrace it. And that led him to some pretty unexpected places. Rebellion, authenticity, even joy. Not despite this lack of like a universal meaning, but because of it.
That is unexpected. So it's not that life is pointless.
Right. It's more like demanding a point from the universe is where we go wrong.
Okay, I'm starting to see where this is going.
He totally flips the script on us.
I like it already.
So for you listening, the big question we're exploring with Camus is, could your own search for meaning actually be what's holding you back?
That's a thought.
And if so, what's the alternative? What did Camus propose instead?
To get there, we got to start with one of his big ideas, this thing he calls the absurd.
Okay, the absurd. When I hear that, I think like ridiculous, illogical.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what usually comes to mind. But for Camus, it's deeper than that.
Oh.
He saw it as this like fundamental contradiction at the heart of being human.
Okay, so like what do you mean by that? Like two things clashing?
Exactly. A clash. Like two realities bumping up against each other.
Got it. So on the one hand, there's the human mind, always wanting to understand things right, always searching for meaning, for reasons why things are the way they are.
We crave that clarity, like patterns, explanations, stories that help us make sense of the universe.
Totally. Think about it. How often do you find yourself asking, what's the point of this?
All the time.
Right. Like we're hardwired for it almost.
Yeah.
We want the universe to have a clear purpose, a reason.
And make sense.
Exactly. But then on the other hand, there's the universe itself. And guess what?
They don't care.
It's vast. It's indifferent. And it's totally silent when we ask those big why questions.
Like it's just not giving us what we want.
Nope. No answers, no grand plan revealed, just randomness and chaos a lot of the time. The world just doesn't seem to care about our human logic.
So that's where the clash happens.
Boom. That's the absurd, that head-on collision between our deep need for meaning and the universe just not giving us any.
That gap between what we want and what the world seems to offer.
Exactly. And we've all felt this, haven't we?
Probably without realizing it.
Like, think about that feeling after you achieve a huge goal. You've worked for years. You finally get there and then
It's not what you expected.
there's this emptiness.
Oh, yeah.
Like, is that it? Or maybe you've done everything society says you're supposed to do to be happy, good job, relationship, the stuff, but there's still this feeling that something's missing.
It's like a piece of the puzzle is just gone.
Yeah. Those moments when we feel that disconnect, those are echoes of the absurd.
So it's not just that the world is meaningless. It's our yearning for it not to be.
Bingo. Camus nailed it in The Myth of Sisyphus. This world in itself is not reasonable. That is all that can be said. But what is absurd is the confrontation of this irrational and the wild longing for clarity whose call echoes in the human heart. Powerful stuff, right?
Definitely makes you think.
And the kicker is we can't just resolve this tension. We can't just stop wanting meaning. It's part of who we are. But we also can't force the universe to make sense. So what do we do?
Right. That's the big question. Historically, we've tried all sorts of things to deal with this discomfort.
Yeah. Religion, philosophies, whole systems built around explaining it all.
Camus saw those as attempts to bridge that gap, to smooth over the absurd.
But he wasn't buying it.
He called them philosophical suicide.
Whoa, okay. Intense much. What's that all about?
He didn't mean actually killing yourself. It's more like a kind of intellectual dishonesty. We cling to these big explanations to avoid facing the truth that maybe there isn't an answer.
So it's a kind of escape.
Exactly. We create comfort, but it's built on shaky ground.
So if those traditional approaches are out, what's the alternative? That's where Sisyphus comes in, right?
Yes. The myth of Sisyphus is key to understanding Camus's whole take on the absurd.
Okay, so quick recap. Sisyphus, this guy from Greek myth, gets punished by the gods. His punishment, to roll this massive boulder up a hill for all eternity. Every time he reaches the top, it rolls back down, and he has to start all over again.
The ultimate image of futility.
It's like about a bad day at work.
Right.
So how does Camus tie this to the absurd?
Well, here's the thing. Camus ends his essay on the myth with this line: "One must imagine Sisyphus happy."
Wait, hold on. Happy. This guy's stuck in an endless, meaningless loop, and we're supposed to imagine him happy. How?
It's a mind bender, right. But Camus's point is Sisyphus's true torment isn't just the physical labor.
It's something more.
It's that moment when he watches the boulder roll back down.
Yeah.
That moment of total clarity when he realizes it was all for nothing and he has to walk back down knowing he'll have to do it all over forever.
That realization would crush me.
Right. But Camus says it's in that very moment of awareness, of fully facing the absurd, that the possibility for authentic living exists. Not happiness in the traditional sense, but something deeper.
So he's not deluded. He knows it's all pointless.
But he keeps going. The gods wanted to break him, but he refuses. He takes ownership of his fate, and by continuing, he transforms it into a choice.
Powerful stuff. So it's not about the goal, it's the striving itself.
Exactly. As Camus writes, the struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. And he wants us to apply that to our own lives. Think about those daily routines, the jobs we do, even our big life goals. We're all pushing our own boulders in a way.
So if you're stuck in a job that feels meaningless,
the meaning comes from how you approach it, the choices you make within that situation.
So for Camus, meaning isn't something out there in the universe. We create it through our actions, our awareness, our own personal rebellion.
Yes, our rebellion against the absurd.
Okay, so we've got the absurd, we've got Sisyphus. What about all those other ways people deal with this feeling of meaninglessness?
Right, we talked about philosophical suicide, but there's another option Camus addressed head on. Physical suicide.
Yeah, if life really is meaningless, it's a pretty logical conclusion, isn't it?
It seems that way. Camus actually starts the myth of Sisyphus by calling suicide the one truly serious philosophical problem.
Wow, so he really grapples with this.
He does, but ultimately he rejects suicide as valid response.
Why? If it's all pointless, why not just end it?
Because, as Camus saw it, suicide eliminates the very thing that experiences the absurd, consciousness. It doesn't actually resolve the problem.
It just erases the person who's experiencing it.
Right. It's another form of escape, just a more permanent.
So both philosophical and physical suicide are ways of avoiding the absurd. That leaves us
acceptance and revolt. That's Camus' answer. To accept the absurd means acknowledging that, yeah, our search for ultimate meaning probably won't be fulfilled, but we keep living anyway. We refuse to escape through easy answers or self-destruction.
But doesn't that just lead to despair?
It could, if it weren't for the revolt.
Okay, so what's that about? Actively fighting meaningless.
In a way, it's a defiant stance against the whole situation. Like Sisyphus, he knows his fate is pointless, but he keeps pushing that boulder. A kind of screw you to the god. He's not giving them the satisfaction of breaking him.
So it's not about giving up.
Not at all. It's about this fierce embrace of life, even without guarantee. That's where the freedom and even joy come in. When you stop demanding the universe give you meaning, you can start creating your own.
That's pretty radical. But how do we actually do that? How do we make this idea real in our everyday lives?
That's the key. And we have to be careful here. A lot of people think embracing the absurd means being all gloomy and nihilistic.
Yeah.
But for Camus, it's actually the opposite. It opens us up to a much more authentic, vibrant, even joyful way of being. When we let go of the need for objective meaning.
We're free.
We're free to create our own meaning, to value experience here for what they are without needing some grand cosmic explanation. And Camus lived this way himself. He loved simple things, swimming, friendships, good food. He was a writer, an activist. He really embraced life. He even wrote, "In the midst of winter, I found there was within me an invincible summer."
Beautiful.
He saw no contradiction between accepting meaninglessness and passionately engaging with life. In fact, that's the heart of his rebellion.
So it's not necessarily about like political revolution?
It can be, but for Camus, the real rebellion is a personal one. It's about saying, the universe may not care, but I do. It's choosing to act as if your choices have weight and value, even if you don't have cosmic guarantee.
That's a powerful way to look at it. It's about finding meaning in the present moment, regardless of the outcome.
Exactly. Think about when you're totally absorbed in something you love. Are you thinking about its ultimate meaning or just enjoying the experience?
I guess not. Like if you're lost in a good book or having a deep conversation.
You're not asking what's the cosmic significance of this. The experience itself is enough.
It has its own value.
Right. And those moments, those flow states, that's a glimpse of what living with the absurd can look like.
So how do we cultivate that? How do we live absurdly well, as Camus put it?
He had some pretty concrete suggestions. First, focus on the quantity of experiences rather than constantly judging their quality based on some external standard.
More experiences, less judgment.
Exactly. Second, cultivate awareness. Really be present in the moment. Don't get lost in chasing some future payoff or dwelling on the past. He wrote, "The present and the succession of presence before a constantly conscious soul is the ideal of the absurd man."
I like that.
And third, passionate engagement. Really dive into life. Don't just go through the motions. And this even changes how we relate to suffering.
Suffering.
Yeah, it's part of life. We can't avoid it. But when we stop demanding it have some grand purpose, we can face it more honestly.
It's not about finding the reason for it.
Right. It just is. We don't need to explain it away or find meaning in it. We could just experience it.
That's a tough one, but I see what you mean. This whole way of living sounds like a constant practice, though.
It is. It's easy to slip back into old habits, to want easy answers, or to just give up. But the freedom it offers is worth the effort.
So if we let go of the search for meaning, where do we direct our energy? What should we focus on?
Camus says we shift our focus from meaning to experience, from explanation to description, from asking why to embracing how.
That's a big shift.
It is. We're so used to searching for reasons, for causes, for grand narratives to explain everything. We're meaning-making machines. But Camus wants us to pause that for a bit, not abandon it completely, but see what happens when we let it go.
So instead of trying to figure out the meaning behind everything,
We just experience it.
like how a child sees the world.
Exactly. Before we learn to overanalyze everything, there's a directness to experience, like a beautiful sunset. It's not beautiful because it symbolizes something. It just is. And that's a more sophisticated way of seeing things than we might realize.
Okay, so some examples. Instead of, why am I feeling this way? It's
How am I experiencing this feeling right now?
not, what's the purpose of my job, but
How can I engage with my work fully today? Or instead of what will this relationship become, it's how can I be present with this person right now?
wow. Shifting from the big picture to the immediate experience.
Right. And the funny thing is, when we stop demanding meaning, our experiences often become more meaningful.
Yeah.
When we stop insisting life needs to justify itself, it becomes more vibrant and alive. There's a paradox there.
It's like that saying, analyzing humor kills the joke.
Exactly. And it's the same with life. Camus writes, living an experience, a particular fate, is accepting it fully. That's what it means to embrace the absurd.
It's about saying yes to what is without needing it to be something else.
And that's where real freedom lies. Not freedom from our condition, but freedom to create our own values and meaning in a world that doesn't inherently give us any.
It's a lot to think about, but it's definitely liberating. So how do these ideas from the mid-20th century apply to our crazy modern world, this digital age where we're always connected, always bombarded with information?
You know, it's surprising how relevant Camus feels today. If anything, the absurd is even more intense now. Think about social media. We're constantly exposed to these curated versions of people's lives.
Everyone's so happy and successful online.
Right. And it creates this pressure, this feeling that we need to be doing more, achieving more, finding more meaning in everything we do.
And buying more. Don't forget buying more.
Oh, yeah. Companies are selling meaning now alongside their product. It's all about finding your purpose, your identity through what you buy.
It's exhausting.
It leads to what we might call meaning fatigue. When everything is supposed to be meaningful, nothing really is. And that's where Camus offers a way out. He says we don't need to find cosmic significance in every little thing. We can just engage with life on its own terms.
That takes the pressure off.
Exactly. It allows for more genuine connection and enjoyment.
So to wrap up, we've been exploring this idea of the absurd in Camus' response.
We've seen how demanding meaning from the universe can lead to a dead end. The absurd, that tension between our desire for meaning and the universe's silence, it's not something to be solved. It's the starting point for a different way of living.
Like Sisyphus pushing his boulder. The task never gets easier, but in his awareness and defiance, he finds freedom.
So for you listening, maybe embracing the absurd means letting go of that need for everything to have some grand cosmic significance. Maybe it means being more present in your experiences, appreciating them for what they are. Maybe it means finding joy in the striving itself.
And Camus reminds us, the struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. And that's not a naive happiness. It's a happiness born out of accepting reality, of choosing to embrace life in all its complexity.
So here's a final thought. What if true freedom comes not from figuring out the meaning of life, but from letting go of the question altogether? What might open up for you when you stop demanding that everything needs to justify its existence?
Something to ponder, isn't it? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
See ya.